Welcome everybody. It's a real pleasure to have you here. As you know, this is a very special session today. We have the privilege to welcome Peter PITTS.
My career pathway was very peculiar. My background is not in clinical science, but in public health. So I come to this conversation not so much as a physician, which I'm not, but as a former senior government employee at the FDA. And I think what you learn when you work inside government, certainly at a place like the FDA, is that whether you agree with their conclusions, they really believe what they're doing. People inside the FDA are on personal missions to improve the public health. What's going on inside the FDA, a little bit more broadly about what's happening in the U.S. in healthcare in general, and how that fits into what's happening globally, certainly in Europe. I look forward to learning as much from you and taking your questions as I hope to share with you.
Recently, we got to know that during the approved trial, when Merck was comparing Vioxx with a placebo, last year, just before your drug was taken off the market, you made some $2.5 billion out of it annually. So what we suggest is we are forming a class action lawsuit, and even to seek an out-of-court settlement, we are demanding nothing less than $650 million.
There was some inaccuracy in your statement. The drug has been on the market only 1 year. You stated it's been like 5 years.
We published this paper just less than 1 year after the introduction on the market, and we just stated that we feel that there was some safety problems.
Nobody claimed the Vioxx is perfect. I don't know how you came up with the idea that Vioxx is perfect. We knew about the side effects. They knew about the side effects. Patient knew about side effects. Doctors knew about side effects.
We're thinking about actually patients, well, nowadays, where it's going to go on. And I'm going to quote Ray Jill Martin, like, whatever decision we make is going to be based on science and what is the best interest for patients.
But we want to have the choice when it is necessary to prescribe Vioxx.
You have the Celebrex.
No, we don't. We only have
Celebrex.
We have only 2 Untitled 2.
We
want this Untitled 2 to be back on the market.
If we put it on the market?
FDA wanted
What if we put me? We are bankrupt, no money. Who's going to put it then on the market?
We don't
We
require
just ask for some time so we can figure out the best way to satisfy everybody.
We definitely need financial reparations because nothing can replace, the death of what was caused by Vioxx, and I think that's only fair.
What level of reparation?
The maximum, whatever the legal system says.
It's very easy for the public to believe that drug companies are evil. If you ask people, are drug companies good or bad, they say they're bad. If you say, are people who have died victims? Yes. Even though maybe they took too many of the drugs. In many of these Vioxx cases, it came out that not only was the patient inappropriately prescribed the drug because of a heart condition, but the patient took too many pills. So, but again, it's hard to argue against an evil company with deep pockets. Because trying to win a case on the merits of science is very difficult. But again, I think the pendulum is swinging back to the middle. FDA, I think, is getting back in control of educating. But I think that there's still a long way to go relative to educating people, even doctors, about what safety really means. I think one of the things that affected me most strongly about the Vioxx case was internally at Merck. People were saying, we have some dangerous stuff going on, and we've got to alert the FDA right now. And they were told, we'll take care of it. Don't, and they didn't. And that's clearly, I think, where the guilt was. The guilt wasn't that it was a bad product. The guilt was that when they were confronted with information contrary to what they wanted to hear, they chose not to go forward with it quickly. Why can't companies do the right thing when it is not in their financial interest? What stops them from doing that? I think that's a cultural question. Unfortunately, I think people are predisposed to believe that industry and FDA are too cozy working together. But if you talk to anybody in industry, anybody from companies will tell you they live in constant fear of these regulatory bodies. It's not cozy at all, it's adversarial. The FDA is funded two ways. Partially, it receives funding from the government, so from tax dollars, which is the traditional way that government agencies are funded, right? It also receives funding through what's called user fees. The technical, or the acronym you'll hear, or people say PDUFA, P-D-U-F-A. And that stands for the Prescription Drug User Fee Act. And what that means is when a drug company wants the FDA to review an application for a new drug, they pay for the privilege. The original concept behind PDUFA, the trade-off between paying for review, you ask yourself, what did industry get for that? Why would industry pay for a review that they previously got for free? What did they get for their money? Well, I think the answer is twofold. The first answer is, with the infusion of industry user fees, the agency hired many, many, many new people to allow it to do more things more thoroughly and more rapidly. So the first trade-off was a better staffed agency. So that's to everybody's benefit. The second thing that user fees brought were a degree of predictability. In the past, before user fees, Merck would come to me at the FDA and you'd give me your application. And you would say, FDA, how long is it going to take for you to review my drug? And my answer was, it'll take as long as it takes. Now, for Merck, that's not a good answer. With PDUFA fees came what's called PDUFA dates. And that means is Merck says, here's my application, here's my $5 million, and I say, we will have this review done by this date. So PDUFA dates.
Can you say then that PDUFA somehow improves the way FDA works?
Oh, absolutely. I think that if you look at before PDUFA and after PDUFA, the number of drugs that have been reviewed has gone up. Drugs are reviewed more rapidly. Staffing has increased. And not only has staffing increased, but the ability of the FDA to upgrade its technology has increased based on the money paid by industry. How do we educate people to use drugs safely and appropriately? And we're not talking about that at all. It's not funded by anybody other than drug companies. I think government needs to seriously, if people in government are seriously concerned about drug safety, the way that you make drugs safer is to have them used appropriately. In the US, this is called safe use. In France, it's called bon usage. And Dr. Marnacci, the new head of APSAPS, spoke about this at a conference last year here in Paris. The concept of bon usage, of safe use, really is catching on. Because in the past, the FDA saw that its mission was safety and efficacy and quality, but that once the product got to market, the FDA's role was just to collect pharmacovigilance data. Now the FDA realizes that part of its mission is safe use, to educate patients and doctors and caregivers and pharmacists as to how to use the drug safely, appropriately. And a good example of this is Warfarin, Coumadin, which is a blood thinner. A lot of people who have heart attacks are given it. Now, it's a great drug. It's been around forever. And it's generic, so it's not even a question of cost. Now, the problem with Warfarin is that for a very small portion of the population, it can cause you to bleed out and have strokes. But there is now a genetic test that a doctor can give to patients to find out who should not get Warfarin. So the FDA changed the label of Warfarin to say there is now this genetic test that you should give to your patients before prescribing Warfarin. And there was a hue and cry that now the FDA was trying to impose its will on the practice of medicine. But that very quickly got tamped down when people realized it was really the FDA's ability to further educate physicians to things it knows about the drugs that it approves. So I think the bon usage, safe use conversation really is kind of that next step in the mission of the FDA. Safety, efficacy, quality, bon usage, education. But that requires funding and requires expertise. You can't just give an agency the money to do something unless it has the expertise and the desire to do that. But as we move into an era where we're not going to have blockbuster drugs anymore, we're not going to have a drug that can be sold for one drug to 8 million people for $1 billion. We're going to have niche busters, personalized medicines that are going to be more expensive to smaller audiences. The whole concept of bon usage becomes that much more crucial. So maybe now is the time to start thinking about this. And maybe government bodies such as FDA or FSAPS or HAS might be the ones to say, you know what, we can't afford to do this, but you can, and you should. And if you do, we will help you and we'll reward you for it. So maybe there's some incentives that government can give to industry to help industry do the right thing. So all that to say is you have a great professor, this is a great course, and if you want to work for industry, be proud of it. Don't let people tell you that working for industry is prostituting yourself, because it is not. It is an important, worthy, honorable calling, and you can do tremendous good. And I would urge you to consider that. Thanks very much. I really enjoyed this.